In 1986, Nintendo introduced gamers to the dark and mysterious world of Metroid, a game that would not only push the boundaries of the action-adventure genre, but also give birth to the Metroidvania genre, a staple of modern gaming. Released for the Nintendo Entertainment System, Metroid brought a mix of exploration, platforming, and non-linear gameplay that made it a defining experience for players in the 1980s. Its protagonist, Samus Aran, would go on to become one of gaming's most iconic characters. The game was developed by Nintendo's Research and Development 1, R&D 1, a team led by Yoshio Sakamoto and Gunpei Yokoi, who were pivotal in shaping Nintendo's early successes. Gunpei Yokoi was already a well-known figure within Nintendo for his work on the Game & Watch series and for helping bring the Game Boy into the world. Metroid, however, was a distinct departure from the company's typical game design, offering a brooding atmosphere that felt different from the lighthearted tone of games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. The game drew inspiration from various sources, including Ridley Scott's Alien for its dark sci-fi aesthetic, eerie environments, and atmospheric tension. The developers wanted to capture the feeling of isolation and danger, which would become one of the game's defining traits. As players explored the planet Zebes, they experienced a world that felt vast and hostile, reinforcing the sense of loneliness. One of the most remarkable things about Metroid was how it blended different genres. At the time, games were often split between action platformers and more exploration-based adventures. It combined both, giving players an action-packed experience, but with deep exploration and backtracking, a mechanic that would later be fundamental to what we now call Metroidvania games. The music, composed by Hirokazu Tanaka, contributed immensely to the game's atmosphere. Instead of catchy melodies, Tanaka focused on ambient sounds and alien-like tones to instill tension and a feeling of solitude. This was another departure from typical NES soundtracks, showcasing how Metroid consistently broke from tradition. The story is simple yet effective, particularly for its time. Set in the distant future, the Galactic Federation discovers that a dangerous parasitic species known as the Metroids has been captured by the space pirate leader Mother Brain, who plans to use them as bioweapons. The Metroids, small floating creatures capable of draining the life force from living beings, pose a grave threat to the galaxy if weaponized. To prevent disaster, the Federation sends its most skilled bounty hunter, Samus Aran, to infiltrate the planet Zebes and stop the space pirates from unleashing the Metroids. Armed with her power suit, Samus must navigate the labyrinthine caverns of Zebes, destroy the Mother Brain, and ensure the Metroids cannot be used for evil. The story may seem straightforward, but Metroid was groundbreaking in how it presented its narrative. Instead of constant dialogue or cutscenes, the game relied on environmental storytelling, letting the player uncover the planet's secrets through exploration. Furthermore, the famous reveal at the end, where Samus removes her helmet and is revealed to be a woman, was a shocking twist. At the time, most players assumed Samus was male, given the lack of female protagonists in video games. This revelation challenged traditional gender roles in gaming and made Samus one of the most iconic characters in video game history. The gameplay was one of its most innovative aspects. Rather than the linear level progression found in most NES games, Metroid encouraged players to explore its large, interconnected world. The planet Zebes was full of branching paths, secret rooms, and areas that required specific power-ups to access, encouraging players to revisit previously explored areas once they had new abilities. This non-linear structure was revolutionary. Players weren't just running from left to right. They were exploring, searching for items, and figuring out how to reach previously inaccessible places. The game introduced mechanics that would become staples of the series, such as the Morph Ball, which allowed Samus to roll through tight spaces, the Ice Beam, missiles, and the Screw Attack. Each upgrade wasn't just a power boost, it was a key to unlocking new areas of the game, blurring the lines between combat and puzzle solving. One of the standout features was its sense of isolation. Unlike other NES titles filled with upbeat music and colorful characters, Metroid created an atmosphere of tension and loneliness. Players spent much of the game alone, battling hostile alien creatures with no one to help. This isolation, combined with the haunting soundtrack and desolate environments, gave Metroid a unique tone that was quite rare for its time. The boss fights also stood out. Throughout her journey, Samus encounters formidable enemies, including Ridley and Kraid, two of the space pirates' top generals, before eventually facing off against the Mother Brain. These encounters added variety and challenge to the gameplay, and each boss required players to master Samus's abilities. The game also had a strong emphasis on exploration and backtracking. Unlike many games of the time, where progress was linear and straightforward, Metroid encouraged players to revisit areas after acquiring new abilities. This aspect of gameplay made Metroid feel much larger than it was, and it gave players a sense of mastery over the environment as they learned its secrets. Initially, Samus was designed as a male character. It was only during the later stages of development that the idea of making Samus a woman was suggested, partly as a way to surprise players. This twist had a massive cultural impact, establishing Samus as one of gaming's first female protagonists and breaking gender stereotypes in video games. Metroid, alongside Castlevania Symphony of the Night, is one of the key games that led to the coining of the term Metroidvania. The game's emphasis on exploration, item-based progression, and backtracking became defining features of this genre, influencing countless future titles like Hollow Knight, Axiom Verge, and Ori and the Blind Forest. Metroid was one of the first games to feature multiple endings, based on how quickly the player completed the game. This encouraged replayability and rewarded skilled players. The quickest ending, where Samus removes her armor entirely, revealing her to be a woman in a bikini, was considered a significant surprise and Easter egg for players in the 80s. Unlike The Legend of Zelda, which used a battery-backed save system, Metroid employed a password system to allow players to resume their progress. This was a common method in early NES games, as cartridges with save batteries were more expensive to produce. Metroid's design and tone were heavily inspired by the 1979 movie Alien. The eerie corridors, hostile alien life forms, and the design of the mother brain all echo the science fiction horror aesthetic that Ridley Scott's movie made famous. Samus herself can be seen as a parallel to Alien's protagonist, Ellen Ripley, another iconic female hero. The Morph Ball, one of Samus's signature abilities, was originally conceived as a workaround for the limitations of NES hardware. The developers wanted Samus to be able to crawl through small spaces, but animating this proved difficult, so they designed the Morph Ball instead. It became one of the most recognizable features of the series. Gunpei Yokoi, the creator of the Game Boy, served as the producer for Metroid. Yokoi was a central figure at Nintendo, responsible for some of its most successful hardware and software innovations. His influence on the game helped shape it into a unique and challenging experience, and his legacy continues to impact Nintendo's approach to game development. Metroid for the NES was a revolutionary title that redefined what video games could be. Its combination of action, exploration, atmosphere, and non-linear gameplay created an experience that was both challenging and immersive. It introduced players to Samus Aran, one of the most enduring characters in video game history, and established a formula that would influence countless games in the decades that followed. To this day, Metroid stands as a classic of the NES era. Its innovations still felt in modern gaming. Its influence is undeniable, and it paved the way for an entire genre of games that emphasize exploration and discovery. With its rich world, iconic protagonist, and innovative gameplay, Metroid remains a hallmark of what video games can achieve.